It's time!
Welcome into the locker room. I've had the pleasure for the last week coaching a volleyball camp up in Kentucky. I'm always honored when people ask me to come coach, and so I've been super busy doing that. Nonetheless, numbers 9 through 7 are on the show today. Now, here's something I will say. There's a guy in this list, in today's list, that for some reason I think is deemed more legendary than he actually is. And I know that sounds crazy. Jacob, he's in your top 10. Of course he's legendary. Yes, without a doubt, he's legendary. He's an amazing player. He deserves to be in the top 10. But this is a guy that I have seen higher on most people's lists than I ever thought I would. Out of all of the guys that I've listed so far, this is a guy that consistently pops up at number 6 or number 7 on most people's lists. Now, I understand lists are subjective, but I just don't see why people treat him like the second coming of one of the greats that are in the top 3. Why people give him the mantle of being right up there in the conversation. So it might be a tad controversial where I have him placed today, but I think I did it fairly so. But before we can get into numbers 9 through 7, make sure you're following TLR Podcast 615 on social media. That is TLR Podcast 615 on social media. Listen, if you like this show, if you enjoy listening to the program, that is how you can help us immediately. Going to the social media, commenting on posts, giving us a thumbs up on Apple Podcasts or commenting on Spotify, whatever it may be. Those are the small things that get the word out there that you're enjoying the show. So if you could do that for me, TLR Podcast 615, I would greatly appreciate it. Now let's get into numbers 9 through 7.
Huh? What are you doing in my swamp?
So as I stated, there is a guy on this list that is going to raise controversy with a lot of you. There's a guy on this list that you're going to be up in arms about, yelling, screaming, getting in my DM saying, how in the world is he not up there at number 6? How is he not up there at number 5? Understand, once again, this is a greatest of all times list. Not the last 50 years. Not the last 45 years. Greatest NBA players of all time. So guys like Bill Russell, guys like Wilt Chamberlain, guys that would not be on a lot of people's lists if we were doing the last 50 years, are in this list. By the way, R.I.P. the legend Bill Russell. You will see Bill Russell pretty high on this list. Greatest American champion of all time. Greatest athlete, or championship athlete of all time. I mean, what he was able to accomplish, 11 NBA titles, I don't care the era. Being able to do something 11 times is remarkable, and he will be sorely, sorely missed. But like I said, there's a guy in numbers 9 through 7 that's going to raise some questions with a lot of people, and it just so happens to be this guy at number 9. Here we go.
Here are 9 celeb names you've probably been mispronouncing.
The Black Mamba himself, Kobe Bryant, comes to you at number 9. Yet another NBA legend that we dearly, dearly miss. Had probably the saddest death in human history, along with his beautiful daughter Gianna in an awful helicopter crash. We lost Kobe way too early. But nonetheless, we still have to talk about him on this list because he is one of the greatest NBA players of all time. He's a 5-time NBA champion, 2-time Finals MVP, 1-time regular season MVP. He's 11 All-NBA first-team selections, 18 All-Stars, 9 All-Defensive first-team selections, 4th in scoring, 16th in steals, 31st in assists, 108th in rebounds, and 196th in blocks. Kobe Bryant is without a doubt the second coming of Michael Jordan. Kobe Bryant was the closest thing that we have seen to Michael Jordan since Michael Jordan and his peak powers in the 80s. Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan have this very unique thing in common. Besides basketball, it was a type of swagger. The reason basketball blew up the way that it did when Jordan was playing it is because Michael Jordan made the NBA global. He made basketball global. He was flying to France. He was flying to places in New Guinea where people don't speak English. They could look at him and go, Michael Jordan. Like that, straight up. Michael Jordan was so popular and made the sport so popular and so fun to watch that I think that also helped his legend. And we'll talk about that later on down the road when we're talking about Michael Jordan. But the legend of Michael Jordan and the legend of Kobe Bryant both grew kind of the same way. They made basketball cool. They made people want a ball. Mamba mentality. Jordan with his tongue out, Kobe with his jersey in his mouth. They were very much similar in the fact that, dude, they were the most competitive guys that we had ever watched playing sports at the time. They would go toe-to-toe with the tallest, best, strongest person in the entire world at whatever they were doing. Whether it was gambling for Jordan, whether it was boxing for Kobe, didn't matter. They were the most competitive human beings, and they truly believed that they would win. Michael Jordan made the NBA global, made the NBA a household name everywhere he went across the entire globe. And when he retired and finally went away, Kobe Bryant was the next closest thing that we had to having someone making basketball electrifying again. Even though we had great players, we had Shaquille O'Neal, who was his running mate for several years of his career and was a big reason that they won some championships together. But Kobe Bryant just had a certain mentality, that Mamba mentality, a certain swagger that made basketball fun to watch, made basketball cool. You see, people loved scoring back then. When Jordan played, people loved to watch scoring, and Jordan was the best at it, always will be the best at it. And Kobe Bryant comes around and he's got these crazy moves. He's got that one leg going off one leg, fade away over a 7'2" Yao Ming, buckets. He made the mid-range cool. He dominated the mid-range. Him and Michael Jordan are the only two athletes in NBA history to make basketball cool because of who they were. Take their games away, their swagger in and of itself was just a different breed, a different animal. It always has been, always will be. Jordan made it global, and then Kobe Bryant brought that spark back. Playing for the Olympic team, playing for the Lakers, it didn't matter. Playing pickup ball when he showed up in the Drew League. Like, Kobe Bryant is just his own unique swagger, his own unique personality, much like Michael Jordan. And in fact, you know, that's why everybody says Kobe Bryant is the second coming of Michael Jordan. He's the closest thing we've seen to Jordan since Jordan. And that's 100% true because they're both very similar. High volume scorers, good defenders. They did whatever it took to win. The most competitive guys in the room at all times and whatever they did. And they brought a type of style and swagger that made kids want to pick up a basketball and in Michael's day, put on a pair of Jordans and go play. And in Kobe's day, you know, go out on the basketball court and hit a 35-foot fadeaway shot over 3 defenders to win a game. And I know what you're thinking, Jacob, if Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan are so similar, you know, if he's all the way back at 9, where in the world do you have Jordan? Is he all the way back at 6? How can they be so similar yet so far apart on your list? And there's a very glaring reason as to why that is. Yes, they had very similar games. Yes, they had very similar mentalities. Yes, they had very similar success if you just look at it at face value. But Jordan, 6 finals, 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs. Kobe, 5 finals, 5 championships, 2 finals MVPs. You see, Kobe Bryant, for a lot of his career, was the running mate, was the sidekick to Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal was still dominating the league, was still dominating games when Kobe Bryant was his running mate. And in fact, a lot of the championships that they won together, guess what? Kobe Bryant didn't win Finals MVP. Shaquille O'Neal was dominating at such a high eclipse that Kobe Bryant was able to be the greatest number 2 of all time. Until Kobe eventually took over. When Shaq started to break down, but for a long time, we talk about Scottie Pippen being the greatest Robin to anyone's Batman. Kobe Bryant was a Robin at one point. Shaquille O'Neal was there running the show, winning championships, winning finals MVPs, dominating games, by the way. 33 points, 35 points, 31 points, 11 rebounds, 15 rebounds. He was dominating games. So realistically, if we want to look at it, Kobe Bryant was a glorified Robin for a few years in his career. Jordan was never a Robin. LeBron, never a Robin. Kareem, we can argue he became a Robin or even a Batgirl towards the end of his career. But I think at 36 years old, you're allowed to be a Robin. By the way, at 38 years old, he's winning finals MVP in a finals and a championship, just so you know. But there were moments in Kareem's career where he dropped down to a Batgirl maybe to a Robin. But for the most part, the guys in the top 10, top 7, they were never Robins. And that's not to say that Kobe wasn't absolutely amazing, that they didn't need Kobe to win. That's just saying that it just worked out to where he was the sidekick to one Shaquille O'Neal for a very short time. That short time produced championships. He did not win those finals MVPs. Shaq did. That's the small details that we get into in this list. Now, Kobe Bryant has done some amazing things. In fact, he has more first-team All-NBA selections than Michael Jordan. And he arguably inspired this generation to fall in love with the sport of basketball. Jordan was more so the swagger of basketball. He made kids fall in love with the sport of basketball. He might be the greatest influencer of basketball over the last couple of decades. Ever since he was an 18-year-old in Philly all the way until the last game that he played, he made people and kids fall in love with basketball. Mamba mentality. So there's a lot of things that he did better than Jordan, but at the end of the day, Jordan was overall the superior version. If this is the Terminator, he's the what is he? Oh my goodness. T1000 to whatever the old model is, or is the old model T1000? I don't know. But Michael Jordan was the liquid Terminator. You know, the one that, like, for some, which, by the way, is the worst one. I love the old school Arnold robot. I don't like the liquid CX-12 or whatever it's called. But Michael Jordan was the superior Terminator. Let's put it that way. He was never a running mate, never a Robin. And at the end of the day, I think that's what hurts Kobe the most, is the fact that he didn't win 3 and 4 championships outside of Shaquille O'Neal. You know, if he had 7 or 8 championships, we're talking about him being the GOAT of all time. But small things like that is what puts you at where you're at on this list. I mean, we could even get into further and go into shooting percentage and all that fun stuff. Which, when we get to the top 3, we're going to get all the way down to shooting percentages. We're going to get all the way down to buzzer beaters. I mean, we're getting down to nitty gritty when it comes to the top 3, because that's how detailed it gets up at the top. But at the end of the day, coming in at number 9, Kobe Bryant. I think that's completely fair. Yes, he was the closest thing we've seen to Jordan. Yes, he's the closest mentality that we've seen to Jordan. The closest swagger that we've seen to Jordan. But at the end of the day, he's not Michael Jordan.
Now let's review the word 8, spelled E-I-G-H-T. 8 is the number that comes after 7 and before 9.
At number 8, I have one Wilt Chamberlain, a guy that does not get talked about enough, a guy that does not get enough respect. Just like Bill Russell. And Bill Russell, you'll find much higher on my list. That is a guy that, with all that he accomplished, gets pushed to the side way too often. And I said at the beginning of this mini-series that Bill Russell is a guy that kind of inspired me to get into doing the top 15, because for some reason that is a guy that is the most winning athlete of all time, yet we just go, meh. Well, it's a different era. It's a different era. Well, I'm doing the greatest of all time, and Bill Russell's way up on my list. He does not get the respect that he deserved. Wilt Chamberlain is one of those guys as well. Does not get the respect that he deserves. And a lot of people want to say, well, it's the era that he played in. It's the competition that he played against. Either way, yes, that's part of it. And I would dare say that even in Michael Jordan's era, even though it was more physical, he was an athletic specimen that no one had ever seen before. I mean, back then it was linebackers and defensive ends, playing most of the game. There wasn't a whole lot of crazy athleticism. Jordan was the most athletic thing that anybody had ever seen. I mean, he's dunking from the free throw line, tongue out, windmills, spin moves, close eyes behind the head. Like, he was shocking to the league back then with his athleticism. And I would dare say that put an advantage on him. Same thing with LeBron James. No one had ever seen a guy at his size be able to move the way that he did and guard all 5 positions and be strong enough to do that, but also have the handles enough to pass and move the way that he does. He's superior in that way. Just like Wilt Chamberlain, although he faced lower competition, so they want to say, and although he had a lot more success because of that, that does not diminish what he did on the basketball court. And that's always been my argument with Bill Russell. Yes, Bill Russell faced a little bit lower competition, but Bill Russell was still absolutely fantastic and dominant. And even playing lower competition or even playing guys that you're superior than or doing anything that, in your life that you're more superior than the people under you, it's hard to maintain that level for a long time. It's hard to still dominate at a high level because the human brain steps in and you go, well, I'm bored of this. And you get lazy and you get unfocused. And Wilt Chamberlain did a lot of his damage in the regular season. Like I said, he is right there with most dominant offensive big man of all time. 2 NBA titles, 1 Finals MVP, 4 regular season MVPs, 7 All-NBA first-team selections, 13 All-Stars, 2 All-Defensive first-team selections. He's first in rebounds, 7th in points, and 80th in assists. For a player to be offensively as dominant as Wilt Chamberlain was, finishing 7th in scoring of all time, it is pretty remarkable that he's first in rebounds all time. Considering the level of guys that have played post Wilt Chamberlain. And I know a lot of people, and this is what drives me up a wall, is those are the same people that are like, that's a record that can never be broken. This is a record that can never be broken. It was set in an era that it's impossible. LeBron James is about to be the greatest scorer of all time. Statistically speaking, he's about to be the number 1 scorer some point during this season. LeBron James will take over the number 1 scorer in NBA history. So it's in today's day and age, it's actually a lot easier, the way the game is reffed, the way everything is played, to break all-time records. And Wilt Chamberlain still holds it down, number 1 rebounder of all time. Here's where Wilt Chamberlain fell short in a lot of areas. Although Wilt Chamberlain was amazing on his teams, although he has championships, he has finals MVPs, he has 4 regular season MVPs, and that's a big reason that he's super high up on my list at number 8. The thing that he fell short on is in big game moments, he didn't want to go to the foul line. He struggled at the foul line. And which is quite shocking for how offensively dominating he was. That was his weakness. That was his kryptonite. I know a lot of people would say the same thing about LeBron James, but we'll get to him in the top 3, so we'll have to talk about it then. If we're being honest, though, let's take a second here. If we're being honest, every superstar has a weakness. Yes. Even Michael Jordan had a weakness. Even Michael Jordan had a weakness. It was called the Detroit Pistons or Isaiah Thomas. You name it. You name it. Michael Jordan had a weakness. Just saying. I mean, we'll get to his weaknesses. We'll get to LeBron's weaknesses and Kareem's weaknesses in the top 3. But I'm just saying. So many of you want to glorify Jordan. He had no weakness to his game. Okay. I'll let you know. But that was Wilt Chamberlain's weakness. He couldn't consistently hit free throws in the big game moments. So he ran away in the playoffs. He would run away from being dominant down low if it meant that he would have to go to the free throw line 12 times a night. And I think that's a big reason that we probably didn't see Wilt Chamberlain with 4 or 5 or 6 championships, because he wasn't the same player from regular season to the playoffs. Now, he wasn't bad in the playoffs. It wasn't like he was 2 points a game, but he wasn't as dominant as he was in the regular season. And in the regular season, he's right up there with the most dominant player of all time. He was just absolutely unstoppable. But despite how dominant he was in the regular season, and despite some postseason success, he fell just a tad short from what I would consider top 5 status, and that is why he landed all the way back at number 8. But that is Wilt Chamberlain.
The newest member of the 7 is
Larry Bird. That's right, Mr. Bird. Larry Legend comes in at number 7 on my list. I cannot wait, to be honest, to reveal my top 6. It is going to be explosive. It's exciting, and I know it's heating up. Some of you are like, if Larry's at the 7th spot, what in the hell does your top 6 look like? Well, you're just going to have to tune in, because it's going to get crazy starting next week. But coming in at number 7, Larry Legend himself, a 3-time NBA championship winner, 2-time Finals MVP, 3-time regular season MVP, 9-time All-NBA first team selection, and 12 All-Star appearances. He's 36th in scoring, 38th in steals, 44th in assists, 54th in rebounds, and 159th in blocks. Needless to say, he's one of the more consistent players across the board. He wasn't the best at scoring, but he was good. He wasn't the best at defense, but he was good. He wasn't the best at passing, but he was good. He wasn't the best at rebounding, but he was good. I mean, 36th and 38th, 44th and 54th. That's crazy. I mean, talk about Mr. Consistent. I mean, there is a guy on this list that is Mr. Consistent, and wink, wink, he's not been named on this list. I'm not going to say the name, but many of you know exactly who I'm talking about. Mr. Fundamental, Mr. Consistent himself. But Larry Bird is the next closest thing to Mr. Consistent. I mean, just all across the board was a damn good basketball player. And also the legend of Larry Bird has just grown and grown from the many stories that have come out. I mean, he would go out there and say, how much you want me to score tonight? And his teammates would be like, 36. He goes, great, I'm going to score 36, and I'm going to score them all left-handed. And he would just go out there and play left-handed and win the game. The legends of you want to talk about the greatest trash talkers in NBA history, Larry Bird is just one of those guys you just want to punch in the face. Because he's so good, he's so dominant, that it was almost impossible to stop him. And he would tell you what he was going to do. He's like Chad Ochocinco in his prime. He would look at you and go, yo, I'm running a square out. You know, I'm running a 5 and in. And be like, the DB would go, okay. And he'd still run a 5 and in and still catch the football and still get 12 yards out of it. After telling you what he was going to do. That's what Larry Legend did. Larry Bird told you what he was going to do, and he would go out there and do it. He would look at the other team's bench and say, I'm going to hit a 3 from this corner. Next possession down, he would turn around and hit a 3 from that corner, turn the bench, and talk mad trash. I mean, he was one ugly son of a gun with that flesh-colored mustache. But man, could he play ball. I mean, Larry Bird, and it was tough for me. Larry Bird, I really wanted to move up to the 5 spot. But since I'm doing greatest of all time, it was really hard to put him up there with the guys that I had in my top 5. But him and number 6 could honestly go back and forth. I was torn between Larry at 7 or at 6. And he fell to number 7th just for the simple fact that for the most part, most NBA players of his caliber, most superstars, had a longer career. And even though he had a little bit of shorter career, I just wish he would have packed in a little bit more in that shorter time frame. You know, Michael Jordan didn't have the longest NBA career of all time either, but what he packed into it was remarkable. 6 championships, 6 finals MVPs, and we'll talk about all his accolades a little bit later. And although Larry Bird had a shorter reign as a superstar in the NBA, not that he wasn't a superstar from game 1 to the final game of his career, it's just he didn't have as longevity as I liked a lot of my superstars to have, or as a lot of these stars have had in our list so far. And he was on a stacked team 95% of his career. I think those two factors are what landed him behind the guy at number 6 and at number 7 for me. That stuff has to matter. It has to matter if you had 3 or 4 all-stars, 3 or 4 Hall of Famers on your team at all times. When you have guys on your team at that high of a level, it's the same thing with Kobe. I mean, we just talked about Kobe. It's a perfect example, and it kind of didn't even think about the way that it lined up. But Kobe Bryant had Shaquille O'Neal a part of his team and a part of his championships and dominating for him, or dominating as well beside him. Like, that does matter when it comes to the greatest players of all time, because you had another great beside you, and Larry Bird was absolutely no shortage of that. He had great players beside him. So, excuse me. So between the shorter career and just a stacked team that he basically played on, that's what dropped him back at number 7. That does not mean by any stretch of the means that Larry Legend was not a legend. As a stretch wing, this guy was just a terrific all-around player. Shooter, scorer, rebounder, playmaker, it didn't matter. Larry Legend dominated the game. But for those simple reasons, that is why Larry Bird lands at number 7 on this list. Now, that's numbers 9 through 7. Numbers 6 through 4 will be debuting next week. And then after that, numbers 3, 2, and 1 will all be revealed on individual episodes, because they need that kind of special time. They need a full 25-30 minute segment to really break down where they're placed and why they're placed there, and to just really honestly talk about their greatness. But that is today's episode. 1 Kobe Bryant at number 9, 1 Wilt Chamberlain at number 8, and 1 Larry Bird at number 7. Make sure you're following TLR Podcast 615 on social media. That is TLR Podcast 615 on social media. Stay up to date with everything I've got going on. Enjoy exclusive content, and just make a friend. Once again, if you would like to share your NBA top 15 players of all time, be sure to DM me on Instagram your list, and I will share that on my story. Once again, everybody, I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room.